My name is Jim Baroud, and this is our global investor chat with Sean O'Sullivan. And actually, we do have attendees from around the world, Sean. As we see some of these participants come online, you'll see that. So I'm delighted to have Sean here today. And he is, as you can see from his background, it is far too long to read through. All you need to know is he's one of the top investors on the planet. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs, at least in the country, if not the planet. And you know what's important for people to realize is what you've done as an entrepreneur is very rare, and it is the hardest job in the world. And again, you can talk for 3 hours just on how hard it is to be an entrepreneur that scales a company, the changing skill sets from the vision to growing a company to scaling it, and all that. So, and plus you're a Renaissance man, and we're lucky to have you here in Princeton. I've said this before. You've done so much, not only an entrepreneur, not only a humanitarian, and doing really noble work, impactful work. That is so extraordinary, actually. And then, of course, now to being one of the top investors, really igniting and helping companies do really amazing work and create new products and services. And now you're doing it to help battle this ugly and terrible new coronavirus. So why don't we get into it? And again, people are still coming online. So I want to make sure that people know they'll get an attendee list, and I'm going to ask people to sort of connect with each other on LinkedIn so that we can sort of replicate digitally what we can do in person, following this talk.
Great.
So Sean,
you've been telling a whole bunch of lies about me now, so now I can tell a whole bunch of lies about you, or we could just get into the questions, whatever you like.
Well, it's all you. I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you give us a quick few minutes about, what your journey?
Well, I was an entrepreneur right out of college. I started a company called MapInfo. So if you've ever typed an address into a computer and seen a street map, that's what we invented back in 1985, and that became a very popular thing. Billions of people now do it every day, and it became a couple $100 million company. Went public in 1994, even before the internet, and then it has gone on since there. Obviously, there's a lot of other much more popular consumer mapping apps by Google and Apple and everything else these days. But that's how I got started, and that. From the proceeds of that company, I left that company in '94, and from the proceeds of that, I started to do some other things, and I am credited with coining the term cloud computing. I have started a company in that space. I also have seen companies hit the wall, including my own, during economic downturns, that like the possible situation that we're facing today. I've invested and been investing since the mid 90s, and run a venture capital firm now that invests around $65-75 million a year in new startups, 150 new startups a year. And we also follow on invest into those startups after they run through our accelerator programs. So the main accelerator programs that we run are HAX, the hardware accelerator, the world's leading hardware accelerator based in Shenzhen and San Francisco and Tokyo and Xi'an. And the other programs that we run are IndieBio, which is based in San Francisco and New York, China Accelerator based in Taipei and in Shanghai, and a few others. FoodX here locally here in New York.
Great. And you shared with me something that I don't think many people know about the ride sharing business in general, that I think is just amazing. So tell us more about that.
Oh, well, so I also started a company back in 2007 that allows, the idea was that people could share their cars you know, as they drive around with strangers. And I know that seems really odd, except wait, no, it's not odd at all. It's what happens when Uber and Lyft and other people do that for you. So I have like the seminal patent in that field, which has been, cited. Actually, I have about 20 patents in that field, and they've been cited by everyone, Uber and Lyft and GM and Google and the Toyota and General Motors and everyone else for the work that they're doing, even with autonomous vehicles, et cetera. So that's something that's still developing, where we've yet to see a whole bunch of money flowing our way from those patent violators, but we will eventually probably get to monetize that. The company that originated that I created is operating in Texas now and doing a few million in revenue, but not the billions in revenue that the well-financed companies are doing.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure we discussed, Sean, was your new IndieBio Coronavirus Initiative. I thought that was really impactful and important and timely, of course. Tell us more about that.
Well, so we are, so Indie is the world's leading investor in early stage life science companies. We back around 50 new life science companies a year through programs that are run twice a year, spring and fall, effectively, in both San Francisco and now actually New York, where we're opening up right now, it's innovations. It's been delayed a little bit because of the coronavirus, but at Rockefeller University, we have one floor of one of their laboratory buildings. And so we take a cohort of, of 10 or 12 or so companies through a program with our staff, that is, several PhDs, drug development people, just entrepreneurs, people who've built businesses before, et cetera, that are on our staff. And each of the companies we help in the same way that when I started my first company, I had a lot of help from mentors that were mentoring me that I sort of stumbled my way across when I was getting started. A senior vice president of General Electric, a guy who'd started a $50 million company up in Albany, New York, as well, and just a few others that really got their hands dirty and helped me understand what a cap table was and how to sell to corporate customers and everything else. That's what we are helping the people that come through the IndieBio program with, getting them commercialized, de-risking their startups, et cetera. Now, and it's in terms of, that's how the IndieBio Accelerator works. It's like a 5-month program with wet labs, scientists and lots of assistants, lots of financing assistance. And we give them $250,000 to sort of sustain for a period of time while they're going through the program and a couple months after, or 9 months after, or whatever, however long that money lasts, until they get financing. So we just announced on Tuesday, what is it, Thursday? We just announced 2 days ago a special program for the COVID crisis, where we are funding up to 8 companies in both our San Francisco and New York programs for anyone who has ideas that apply to this crisis in the life sciences area. We will also, and have also, been funding other COVID-related ideas in hardware and in other areas through our HACS program. But the initiative we just announced is for that program. And we anticipate spending at least $10 million of our own money supporting those companies and the companies in our current portfolio in the COVID crisis in emergency funding, really, in the next several months, and as well as bringing another 50 million or so to play from other investors that generally follow along into our companies, our startups.
Great. And on the Eventbrite event listing, I have a link to your release that talks about not only your current portfolio companies that are doing work in response to the coronavirus, but also this new announcement. So if anyone wants more information, they can certainly go to your website, the IndieBio
Yeah, I'll
website.
just briefly tick off the couple of areas that we're looking at. One is in diagnostics for rapid, and affordable testing. We recognize that in order to completely eradicate this condition, we really, and to get our economy back in play, we actually need to have every single human being tested. It's not the sort of, like yesterday, New York had 1/4 of the tests done in the entire country, and they had 13,000 tests done. We need to do hundreds of millions of tests. We are far away from being able to do that right now, and there's a number of things that needs to happen in order for that to get done. So diagnostics, point of care diagnostics, accelerated or other reagents, all sorts of things that can help make those diagnostics happen more rapidly and more affordably. So number two would be various therapeutics, including small molecule therapeutics. We funded a company just yesterday that is repurposing a well-known previous therapeutic, hasn't been used in humans for a bunch of years, but it has passed all the safety tests from before that.
15 minutes.
It was effective. I'm sorry about that. That little reminder there. It's 15-minute timer. You'll hear it again 15 minutes if I don't figure out how to shut it down. So we are looking at therapeutics, small molecule therapeutics, as well as antibody therapeutics for sort of the 3-month period where you can boost your immunity, especially for our first care or your first responders, the people, the medical doctors and whatnot that really need to protect themselves, and make sure they're not passing on the infection to other doctors as well as patients, et cetera. So that's another area. And then other sort of general purpose needs, including just technologies for reducing the spread of infection or disinfection technologies, various other types of things. Yeah.
Got it. That's great. So now you have a really good purview of the whole world as far as investing, because you invest all over the world and you have accelerators all over the world. So why don't you talk about the locations of your accelerators and then tell us what you've seen, in the recent past in as far as investment activity, and now with this terrible virus, how things have changed and what you're forecasting. I don't want to put you on the spot, but give us some sense for how you see the funding landscape.
Those are a lot of different questions. I'm going to tackle a couple. The first one is that, different parts of the world are in different stages of this. I mean, even different parts of the United States are in very, completely different stages of the progression of this. As people are calling it, species event. Everyone in the human species is aware of this and will always remember this. Children who are growing up now will remember it just as much as, maybe we remember 9/11 or I think it could be even bigger. Actually, it's a bigger effect. You didn't shut down the main streets of every country in every city in the country by, even in the town I'm in, Princeton, there are thousands of people that have been thrown out of work, and many of those jobs are not coming back because those shops are not going to reopen, et cetera. It's going to be, it is a bloodbath, and it is going to be a really tough time for everyone for a long time. That said, we will peak, it will turn around, and we have work to do. So let's keep working on that. What we have learned from the half of our staff that is in China, who went through this 2 months ago, is that that it actually, if you do. If you listen to Governor Cuomo, you have a good, solid leadership there, and I'm sure there's other good leaders out there. But he's doing the right things that are necessary for this time and getting people ready for what's coming. And it is, we're in the calm before the storm, and it doesn't feel very calm at all, does it?
Mm.
It's not calm, but this is the calm before the storm, and it's going to get much, much, much uglier as hospital systems start to fail and everything else. So we have to do what we can right now to get ready and to prevent, the deaths of several 100,000 people. So, be careful about the advice that you're listening to. Cuomo has some really good advice, I'd say, and Dr. Fauci is pretty great as well. But I'd be selective about listening to anyone who says that this is going to be over by Easter, because it will be 10. Instead of when that pronouncement was made, there was 100 people a day dying, and now it's just 200 people a day, but it will be thousands of people a day dying by the time Easter comes around. And that's not something we can live with very easily in our hearts. It's a terrible travesty for so many of our families, and we have to ready ourselves, and be contemplative about what we can do to try to change the course of this all. So, and I think people are standing up and listening to good leaders and sitting down and working from home and doing everything we need to do. So there have been major adjustments that have been made that has definitely already altered the course of what would have happened, and yet I think we still have a very hard time ahead of us. So I'm not sure how what the lessons that we're seeing across the world. China is already. It's still in like these lockdown periods are happening, and they lock down, they're sort of freeing things up a little bit, but they're locking down again, depending on different parts of the country, et cetera. We're going to see a lockdown, open up, lockdown, up until the point where there's a good therapeutic, and where we have perhaps 5 times less as people dying based off of like a new sort of treatment plan. And when that happens, I think we can sort of reopen the economy sort of full rate. But up until that, you'll see an opening and a closing, as it gets to be picking up again, because it's not going to be eradicated until there's 100% testing and isolation. And so that's going to be several months away. It could be, it'll be coming back probably for years and years. But in terms of what we're seeing elsewhere, the investments have stopped in the United States. It's overkill to say stopped, but what you'll see is that new investments aren't being made. The VCs are holding back, and they're going to support the companies that they have, rather than in this time of uncertainty launching into a whole bunch of new investments, unless they're perhaps extremely timely, right? Extremely related to COVID or the opportunities that are coming out of COVID. The wallets will open up for some of that, but otherwise, a normal business, not on the radar. People may take meetings, but they're not going to end up giving you money for a new business, unless of course they're already an investor in you and they think you're doing well and they want to keep you alive. And even then, you'll probably face some punitive terms. The focus here is getting 9 months of runway so we can get to the other side of this, for the people who are dependent on investors to keep their businesses running. And in a lot of cases, even great businesses, we just shut down a business in New York, in Brooklyn, yesterday. It's not, we're putting it in hibernation, but they had to. They were on a track to probably do 8 million in revenue this year. Their orders are up. They're doing great, but they can't produce the product. It's a physical product. They had to. They can't produce it. It's not COVID related. They can't go into work. They can't manufacture it. They had to save the company by laying off 57 people just yesterday, and that's happening all over the country, and that's going to keep happening. That's why you see record rates of unemployment now, and you'll see it getting worse in the months to come. So in that environment, it's really hard for an investor to invest with confidence. There's not that much certainty. I will say that you're going to see, and here we are. We're in the accelerator business, right? So we ourselves are going to be dependent on a lot of angels, right? Angels have closed their wallets, so we've seen that. We saw that in China, before, and we're seeing it now in the States. And naturally they're closing their wallets because what they thought they had a retirement account that could pay for their life, et cetera, it's down by 30%, 40%. They're very worried about where they're spending their money right now. And, a good opportunistic person with cash is going to want to come in and invest because it is a good time to invest in the right kind of businesses if you have freedom to operate. But how many businesses really have freedom to operate right now? So there's a lot of questions I'm sure that people would have about this discussion and whatnot. But whatever you do, you have to make the adjustments to your businesses that you can to get 9 months of runway to try to get through to the other side of this. Because at that time, I think if you can get there, remember 9 months of runway, you still need to go then do the fundraising. That's only really saying this, that's saying the worst of this will be over in 3 months, which could very well be in parts of the country. But it's still going to be a tough time to raise money, I think.
Right. Well, that's sobering, and but that's the reality. And you see, and I think 9 months is, I think something we should keep in our minds, right? As far as when we most realistically get to the other side or get to some more clarity, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can look at this. I mean, if we act as fast as now, you look at China and say, "Oh, China is a great use case. Look, they only had however many deaths and however many infections, but it's not over in China, right? There's no vaccine. This is going to come back. It's going to bubble up again. It's already bubbling up again, and so." So we have to recognize it'll be open, close, open, close. There's going to be a lot of reliance on the government in this time, which is something that is alien to most startups. I mean, it's the last thing you think of, right?
Right. So, for the entrepreneurs, share with us just one thing to take away from all the insights that you have over the years from building businesses in tough times.
Well, one thought is, never waste a crisis, right? Never waste a crisis. So when you have a crisis, it's like a near-death experience. And I've had a couple of near-death experiences in my life, and it is so clarifying as to your purpose, what you should be doing, where you should be focused, and how, what's the purpose of your life? What's the meaning of your life? And what is the meaning of your organization? So there's a lot of, there's a lot of people that are not going to be, thinking that, they can sort of just run along a situation as normal. It's not normal. And so you need to be brutal about the decisions that you make. Brutal, not to people, not to humans, but brutal in terms of the clarity. And yes, sometimes it will be brutal to people, but it's in terms of the layoffs and things like that. Like I talked about these companies in Brooklyn and throughout the world, in Australia as well. I mean, this is the entire world. This is happening in our world of investing, and so you just have to be ready to have those incredibly clear, the clarity of a near-death experience, which is what we as a species are living through right now in a way, and certainly economically more so than even physically. It should get everyone to get rid of that second product line that doesn't mean anything and isn't ready to sell. Get focused on what you can get that people really need to market today, and forget everything else. it's just that level of focus is going to be necessary. So don't waste the crisis. Make the changes you need to make to your business, and make them now.
Got it. Thank you. So we have some people with questions. I'm going to ask folks to simply submit them in the Q&A tab on the bottom, and we'll pick off a few to ask Sean. In the meantime, Sean, I know you are working on the launch, and this may be delayed, the new IndieBio Accelerator in New York. Why don't you give us an update on that initiative?
So IndieBio New York, actually, we our labs in San Francisco have freedom to operate because we're working on COVID, crisis stuff. So we're an essential business, and in New York, we're in the middle of renovations on the space, but assuming that space is open, we would be, taking the COVID-related companies and putting them in and working here. Like everyone, I admire hugely all the people in the food services industry and the grocery stores and every other part of our economy that we are dependent upon. And R&D and development of things that are related to solving this are just as critical as anything else. So we need to keep our people, producing this time more than any other time. And effective and thinking about these problems and having access to the things they need to solve these problems. That said, even in the month or so before this, we were doing head scanning. Like I went to Taipei about a month ago, or something like
15 minutes.
Oops, sorry. Sorry about that noise. It'll come back again in 15 minutes. I was in Taipei, and you step into the airport. They scan your head for your temperature. They're doing that now in Newark. Finally, last Sunday or so, they started doing that from international flights. But they do it also when you're in the hotels, right? And they do it in the workplaces. And so, like, I was in a hotel. Every time I stepped into the hotel lobby, I had to get my temperature measured. Because they're trying to catch it at the right point. We have to do that in our workplaces, and those things are maybe a lagging indicator, but it's better than no indicator. And logging people who are there in the workplace in a given day, so that who was contagious, that given day, and then you can notify everyone else, et cetera. After the fact, you have to refer back to those records and things like that. This is all sort of like living in wartime, things, and we need to adjust to a few of those issues. Ultimately, won't be solved until we can just test people twice a week or so with very affordable tests, and stomp this thing out. And we do have a company, for example, in San Francisco right now. It's an Argentinian company that we backed a year ago that we've scaled up. They've got around 20 people, 25 people, that they're producing a short, it's an hour-long test, like a pregnancy stick kind of thing, that'll tell you whether or not, you can use urine, you could use blood, you could use, the nasal swab or the saliva, and it will tell you in an hour whether or not you have the infection and to what level, what degree you have it. So things like that need to come out. That device, which is only like $15 a test, or even less, possibly, for the test strip, and the device itself is about $150 or something like that. That needs to all be manufactured and gotten out to every business, et cetera. I'm sorry, I'm sort of talking about, you were asking about IndieBio New York. I'm talking about some specific companies in IndieBio that are trying to help. But we're looking to back companies that are doing a variety of different things like that. IndieBio New York is also more focused on therapeutics. We have our partner there, the lead partner in IndieBio New York, Stephen Chambers, was one of the founding scientists of a company called Vertex, which is a very famous $75 billion market cap therapeutics company. He's worked on many drugs there, including the original drugs, and also launched his own startups in therapeutics. and has joined us, to help lead other therapeutic startups. We have the guy who is the chief science officer and chief medical officer for Celgene, who's one of our adjunct partners. We have another therapeutics guy who is with Regeneron as their senior vice president for strategy and business development, and a medical doctor himself. So we have that kind of expertise all, in our New York program. Several other. We have a PhD microbiologist, Julie, who has Dr. Wolf is a specialist in infectious diseases. We've got just an incredible team that's really able to help, particularly on therapeutics, which will probably be about 30% of the companies. But we also do future of food, cellular agriculture, any sort of application where you can use biology as a technology to solve a problem.
And so we just had a question, Sean. Will that new COVID program be open to all companies anywhere, or just where IndieBios are geographically located?
So actually, because unless if it's a COVID company and they need a lab, then they're welcome to use our labs. If they, we are actually running virtual accelerators, and we did this back in China when this first happened. And surprisingly, even these conversations that we're having here, like over Zoom, are very effective when you're working with a group of just a small community of 15 or so co-founders, 20 co-founders, all working together and learning from each other in a virtual environment like Zoom. So we are still running cohorts even virtually, and then doing a lot of one-on-one mentoring over Zoom.
Great. Another question is from Krishna, and I know he gave some links which I will share with the group regarding some of the work his startup is doing now to help with the COVID response. But he asked about, should the government step in to save jobs? And he also shared a link from the EDA in New Jersey, which is helping, has some new programs just launched yesterday to help small businesses and entrepreneurs. So I think we know the answer to this, but Sean, give us sort of your take on what you think the government, if you had a magic wand, what should the government do?
Well, it's very funny because in some ways, the worst thing the government could do is to pretend that this isn't happening and just funding people, funding the businesses, because these businesses are going to be destroyed anyway. First priority is stopping this condition. That said, because if you try to, for example, you fund a cruise company, you're causing more problems, right? If you're funding all these things, everybody needs to mothball a little bit, some of those industries for a little while. Restaurants are going to, you can't just keep funding that ad infinitum. I mean, I've always been a fan of Andrew Yang's sort of thing to, not always been, actually only recently been a fan of the universal basic income. I look at that as actually a way of sort of correcting some of the runaway sort of bad effects of unregulated capitalism, and rewarding people who are stay-at-home people, like whether there's mothers or people who have have to deal with special needs children or anything like that. There are whole bunches of reasons why a universal basic income can help a lot of people. That said, it's an extraordinarily expensive program. I'm not a macroeconomics person, so I don't really have the answer to that. I do know that we've just passed a $2 trillion aid program. I think that's a good idea. And that's a $2 trillion aid program every 2 months. that would be a very sobering thing. So we have to figure out a longer term solution. But yeah, I mean, human suffering, we've got to alleviate the human suffering, and we've got to get the economy rolling. And we know the economy is built on small businesses. I don't have an answer for how that money should be dispersed. I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I think people need to get back to work as soon as possible, which means we need better tests and we need universal testing at some point.
Okay.
To solve that.
Do you think robotics and automation development are going to be accelerated given COVID circumstances?
Yeah, we actually have a couple of robotics companies that are cleaning robotics, and they've seen huge orders, upticks in orders as well. So like things that big, large style robots that clean bathrooms. It's very funny because like we don't know that much about how this is being spread. And it, in SARS, which is related to SARS, it was not pleasant to talk about, but it was the virus was coming out in your poop, and it was a fecal matter contamination, and people not thoroughly washing their hands after going to the bathroom that caused the spread of that. To a higher degree. I'm sure there's other causes for it as well. But these are like there's still so much to discover as to how to get this right. But robots can only help so far. I think if you look a little bit longer term, I mean, there's no question that robotics are going to, from the longer term, continue to be more and more important in our lives. They improve our quality of life. They take away dangerous work and dirty work and that people don't generally want to do. A lot of the agricultural work is super hard work. I used to work on a farm myself when I was a teenager, and it's backbreaking work, and it is not work that you'd like to do. So hopefully we can open up better jobs over time, and robots will be helping us do that.
Great. So someone asked a question about Africa, about the investing going on there, and they're wondering if there might be more investments in Africa going forward, or if that will be curtailed even more considering the pandemic.
So a couple of things. Actually, Africa is really an interesting case because Africa hasn't been hit very hard by this. And it seems like there's some better immunity there to this. And there are some theories about why that is that need to be pursued a little bit. But ignoring the effects of COVID-19 for a moment, we have invested in Africa in a handful of companies, maybe 10, 15 companies. It is extremely difficult, even when you have the greatest companies, the greatest entrepreneurs, most natural talent, engineers and whatnot, really good at their products. The problem is that, for many technologies, you need to have enough capital to be able to get it up to a certain critical mass and at that point you can scale the business on its own, based off its own profits. In Africa, there's not that capital. There's no follow-on capital. So when we invest, at the stage we invest, is generally as not as an angel, super angel, at the accelerator, at the seed level, or what's called pre-seed level. $250,000 is our normal initial check size. We invest at the accelerator, $250,000, say, and then other investors are supposed to come in. We look for at least a 5-to-1 sort of support for every dollar we invest. 5 other dollars come from other investors, and if there's no 5 other dollars there, then we have to be the sugar daddy for every single one of those companies. There's terrible dynamics in that, because there's no pricing or repricing the rounds. There's no market for the stock, so it's worthless effectively. Why would we even put more money into it? Because no one else is buying it. That's a real challenge, and it it's been in other markets before. Europe is actually not that great either. It's a hell of a lot better than Africa, but China is pretty good. Asia is pretty good in a lot of places. Europe is not as good, and Africa, is pretty terrible. And so if you can't have an early investor invest and have the company succeed, then later investors aren't going to come in because there's no ecosystem of enough companies and enough money. And so, yeah, I don't see this changing in a favorable way. The economics in Africa, I would say, it would would be unfavorable, if anything.
Well, I'm still waiting for some more questions. So if anyone has any questions, please submit them as we sort of wind down now. I am concerned, Sean, about the developing countries, even though it hasn't hit Africa yet, or hopefully it never will. But if we're having so much trouble with this crisis, with this virus, I can't imagine, the poor developing countries battling it.
I know what you're saying, and I would fear very greatly about that possibility as well. For some reason, it could be microbiome related. They seem to be doing better. There's a bunch of things that in the developed world are much worse than in the undeveloped world. For example, asthma, autism,
15 minutes.
Things like those things that are related to the microbiome. It actually, you see a much higher rate of these conditions in the developed world than you do in island economies or more natural economies.
I just got a question about Latin America. Speaking of developing economies, obviously there's a wide range of economies in Latin America. What's your take on South America? Have you been investing in South America?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We invest. We invest. I don't know, 100 companies, 100 countries around the world, 100 something like that we've invested in with headquarters in those different countries. So we have 970 investments or so globally. Not all of them have survived, but there's probably 830 of them are still alive or more. And so in Latin America, we've got some great companies. Actually, we have a superstar company. Jeff Bezos just led a $40 million round into a company called Notco, which is a alternative protein. It's a food formulation company using plant-based proteins to replace animal agriculture. So they produce milk. Starbucks did a test of all the different nut milks and all these other things, and they just selected Notco to be their favored milk. Burger King does the Impossible Burger up here, but they're using Notco's burger down in Latin America, because it's a great company. And so we're seeing some great companies, great opportunities, and we'll continue investing in Latin America. This COVID rapid testing, there's some great scientists, in particular Argentina, Chile, Brazil. There's some great work that is going on all around the world. There's bright people everywhere.
Sure. And what about telehealth? We have a question about telemedicine and how that will be accelerated, perhaps. How do you see that?
Massively accelerated, right? Like, there's huge numbers of people that are now discovering for the first time that they can actually do either the therapy sessions or the medical doctor sessions without even physically seeing the doctor. Or like, for example, there was in Ireland, they've made it mandatory that the doctor's offices have a screening via video chat before going in to see them. And the doctors are astounded that it's such a much better way of doing it, because they'd not been familiar with it. I mean, nobody's familiar with it. There's a new way of doing business. So they've discovered that they can be much more productive this way. And then in one case out of like 5 or one case out of 8, they have to have the person come down to the surgery, as they call them in Ireland. But the clinic, and then they'll visit that person physically and take their temperature or listen to their heart, or listen to whatever they listen to with those damn things they do. I'm not a doctor.
There was a
I think it'll be
question of,
huge.
yeah, no, I believe so as well. There was a question about, bootstrapping. So before an entrepreneur takes external funding, what are some of the creative ways you've seen entrepreneurs fundraise right from the start to get going? And I think that's obviously a really important question these days.
I mean, like what people like, I don't like this in general, and it generally screws up a technology company. But what keeps you close to the customer is to work on effectively on consulting projects where there's a desperate need by one company that is looking to solve a certain problem. You get close to it. They don't want to necessarily buy your product off the shelf, but you then end up getting a lot of revenue, or 90% of your revenue off of one customer. That does tend to draw that company into a services company for the rest of their lives. So as a VC, it really is something that we don't get involved with companies like that generally. But in terms of surviving, it is a great way to survive, and it is a great way to bootstrap your business. And if you have the logical aptitude to be able to separate the customer specific work from the platform specific work, then it's really difficult to do that. Most 99% of people can't do that, or 95% of people can't do that. But if you can, then you have a little services arm and you have your product arm, and then you can make it work.
Right. And of course, most companies use family, friends, and, as they say, fools.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. That's how I got my start. I knew a lot of fools.
And on the other hand, there's a few other ways to fund these days: crowdsourcing, crowdfunding,
Yeah.
even Bitcoin, if you want to go down that road. I mean, there are different types of options these days to the benefit of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are fooling themselves if they think they can do an ICO, initial coin offering. That was such a short window when that was possible, and it was a terrible idea even then. I was preaching against that. I knew it was not going to work, and billions of dollars later, people found out that it wasn't going to work. But it is, so I don't think that's a viable strategy. You have to think, how can you be of service? I mean, the whole, in many ways, us as human beings, we have to figure out, hey, and we know it, I think, even more clearly now than we would have in our stupor before the coronavirus, how deeply we are reliant on others, and how deeply we are interconnected and need to be of service to others. So if we are building a business that is of great service to an audience, then we will figure out a way to survive. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out what that audience is and designing something that is meeting a critical need that they have in a cost-efficient way, or in a way that speaks to them. And that is, that's a challenge, a central challenge for most entrepreneurs in all times. But I think it becomes clear to us now how important it is to be of service to others.
Great. So we're winding down now. Sean, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I asked you to pick a poem. Hold on, there might be one more question. No, as far as a poem to sort of close this session out with, do you have it handy?
Yes, I actually I have it's not exactly a poem, but it's a line that's often attributed to that great Catholic Nobel Prize winning worker, Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa is falsely attributed to Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa did not say she said this, but other people said that Mother Teresa said this. But the quotes from Dr. Kent Keith, it sounds a little like a poem to me, so I'll read it. So it says, if you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness will make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest people with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest people with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. And what you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. That is unfortunately what I think a lot of people are going through right now. But it says, build anyway. So, it's Dr. Kent Keith. I don't know who he was, but it's a nice poetic sort of quote. So I hope that fits the purpose.
I think
Build anyway.
that was apropos. Thank you so much, Sean.